Greetings, ladies and Mandeljets, and welcome to this latest episode of Tales from Outer Space, where I take a space-related story from around the internet and read it out loud for your enjoyment. All the relevant links are down below. Please don't forget to do the usual YouTube gumph, because if you don't, the nanite swarms will steal your other sock. But more importantly, as always, I hope that you enjoy. I'd just quickly like to thank my Tier 5 channel members and patrons: Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Sergeant Boomer, and Cat Crab Lobster. Again, thank you very much. Tales from Outer Space 987. Humans Are Scary. The First Terran Systems War. Written by AceSorou. When one thinks of human resilience, most minds recall the events of the Terran Systems War, the only two galactic conflicts humanity was ever involved in. It is my intent in this article to give you a brief overview of the events of the First Terran Systems War, namely the cause and the results of the actions taken by the Keth and their invasion of human territories. But in order to understand the Keth motives, one needs to understand what a death world is. A death world, as defined by the laws of the Galactic Concord, is a world in which one or more organisms or planetary irregularities threaten the existence of sapient creatures which reside on it. There are 4 classifications of death worlds. An Alpha-class death world is a death world in which there is only a singular threat, such as an apex predator that can readily hunt most galactic citizens, or a regularly occurring natural disaster, such as planet quakes or volcanoes. Though dangerous, the hazards of Alpha-class death worlds are few in number, and are unlikely to be encountered, even with multiple visits. Death worlds are rare enough, but most fall into the Alpha class, and species who evolve to sapience on such worlds are often herbivores and are, as a species, generally indistinct from normal galactic standards in terms of physiology. Beta-class death worlds and death worlds that are more dangerous. Perhaps there is a single species apex predator that is far more common and numerous, likely to the point where said species pose an existential crisis to the native sapients, or a disease that is constantly evolving, making it resistant to medicines and natural immunities, or in some cases, a huge and continuous storm that has caused heavy winds for thousands of years and traveled across the surface of the planet, wreaking havoc across everything in its wake. Sapiens from such death worlds are considered normal to their biology, and are generally amicable when socializing. But put into a situation that trigger a flight response, they will generally choose instead to fight, often to defend others. Delta-class death worlds are worlds that have multiple existential threats to sapient species. Predators, natural disasters, and disease are common on these worlds, so common in fact that at one time it was believed the environments of these worlds were so hostile, sapient life simply could not have evolved there. There have only ever been 3 species that evolved on Delta-class death worlds, the first being the Kriskan, who are now, for better or worse, extinct. The third were the Tadari, carnivorous reptilians bipedal sapiens with 4 arms and 2 rows of razor-sharp teeth. The second is the subject of this article: the humans. Humans are bipedal omnivore primate species with 2 arms and no natural defenses. The only thing these 3 species have in common is that they consume meat, whether partially or wholly. They eat other species to survive. But unlike the Kriskan or the Taldori, the humans consider eating sapiens and any species a taboo. I will only make a footnote here as to the last class of death world, Omega. Omega-class death worlds are worlds in which the environment is actively trying to kill life on the surface, such as worlds within the vicinity of a neutron star, yet still theoretically habitable, with an atmosphere that is considered highly toxic even to Delta-class death worlders. These worlds are only theoretical, and none have ever been observed occurring naturally. Back to the humans. When humanity first developed warp drive on their nuclear-powered starships, there was no great fanfare, nor was there any panic. the collective galactic community gave unanimous statement of, "Oh neat, another species to interact with." The panic only started when envoys discovered their homeworld. Terra was a Delta-class death world. At the time, the galaxy's only interaction with Delta death worlders was the Kriskin, whose stated goal was to consume all life in the galaxy. And it took a combined effort of all 5 major governments to put an end to them. No one wanted a repeat of the Kriskin crisis. Yet, these humans seemed nice enough. They claimed to come in peace and wished to offer their goods and services for trade. Most other people, including the Keth, were wary of these humans. The Keth were the galactic oddity of all of their own, a carnivorous bipedal feline race that evolved on a normal world. When they first entered the galactic community, they were seen as an uncharacteristically benevolent. Actually, quite similar to humans in retrospect. But where the humans and the Keth differ is in the timing of the entry into the galactic community. The Keth entered during the time of relative peace, and so other species were much more accepting of their ways. When the humans entered the galactic community, it was right on the heels of the Kriskin crisis. Not even 10 solars had passed since the last Kriskin world was invaded, and their kind exterminated. It wasn't something that we were particularly proud of, but many felt that it had to be done. And now, here was this other species coming out of nowhere from a Delta death world, just like the Kriskin. You can hazard a guess at how the galaxy felt about this. Though many were fearful of the humans and their supposed tricks, some did risk accepting their trade agreements, and they were rewarded for it. Though this pacified some species, most were still certain that the humans were lulling us into a false sense of security, where they would strike at us when we least expected it. The Keth were not about to let them strike first, fearing the worst of the situation. The Keth declared war on the humans. Within fractions, Keth's fleets were already engaged with human territories. They forced dozens of colonies to lay down arms and surrender without firing a single shot. These colonies were not prepared for war, and had not set up any defenses, so the surrender came quickly, though a few of their number would flee into the local foliage and flora of their various planet. The vast majority were put into slave camps, where they were manufacturing goods to help continue the war effort. It only took 2 lunars for the Keth fleet to reach Terra. The human fleets were impossibly outclassed in terms of weapons and shielding. True, coil guns and missiles have their place in combat, but against pinpoint accuracy of point defense cannons and the magnetic pulse shields developed to fight the Kriskin, the humans stood no chance. The population was enslaved, and the majority of the human combatants fled into the forests, jungles, and mountains. Some even fled into the sea, using planetary vehicles specifically for underwater operations. The ease at which the humans were conquered gave pause to everyone involved. The Keth, along with the more paranoid races, had assumed that the humans had a massive fleet of conquest at their beck, poised to strike as soon as they let their guard down. But to their shock, there was no such fleet, and now it seemed like the humans' previous greeting of, "We come in peace," seemed a lot more tenable. The species that agreed to trade with the humans all condemned the Keth invasion, imposing heavy sanctions on their empire backed by the Galactic Concord. The entire war had been a heavy misstep for the Keth, but there were those willing to defend their actions. Having only seen one other example of Delta Deathworlders, the safe assumption was that humans would be the same as the Kriskin were, and it was just bad luck on their end that they appeared right after the galactic crisis. Still, there were calls across the galaxy to return the territories taken by the Keth back to the rightful human owners. At this point, I should note, other than being a predatory and carnivorous species, the other defining trait of the Keth is their stubbornness. Instead of admitting that their war was wrong, they doubled down, insisting that the humans had to be hiding some sort of weapon of mass destruction, or some fleet that was ready to strike against the galaxy. Anything to justify their unjustified invasion. So the Keth, despite their sanctions and the public outcry, maintained their occupation of the human worlds. This was a mistake. Not because of the outrage from the galactic community, but because of the tenacity of the human warriors. Soon, supply depots, cargo ships, and isolated outposts began being targeted by human warriors across all the occupied territories. In this way, the Keth ground forces had been introduced to human warfare. They would strike where the Keth were not prepared to meet them, and melt back into the shadows. They would capture Keth weapons and use them against their occupiers. They would hide amongst the civilians, only striking where their own kind was safe. The occupation of human territories quickly became a quagmire. Politically, it made the Keth look bad. Tactically, it was said that there was a human with a rifle hiding behind every blade of grass. Financially, the Keth economy was ruined by these sanctions. After only one solar, the Keth abandoned their occupation of the human territories, returning it back to the various governments of humanity. Interestingly, when the Keth leaders were brought to tribunal before the Galactic Concord for their actions, and the leaders of humanity were given the chance to decide a suitable punishment for the Keth, they were merciful. Aside from reparations for the lost fleets and warriors, the humans merely demanded the sanctions on the Keth Empire be lifted, and that the Keth sign a trade agreement with every human faction. Men asked why the humans would ask for such gracious terms of punishment. One of the humans merely said, "All in all, the occupation wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been." This left many to shudder at what horrors humanity had been through, that they can call the imprisonment of their entire population a forgivable act. It implied that what the humans did to themselves was somewhat far worse. That thought alone scared the member races of the Galactic Concord. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.